so from the readings that I sent to you, so you should have some sort of an idea of what I'll be talking about today, which is an analysis of the writing test using a particular model, statistical analysis model, with some, I think, some interesting implications for us, and some interesting things to note about how we go through the process of assessing writing in an objective or supposedly objective test format. So a little bit of the context for this discussion is how often we give the writing test, and we give the grad school testing. We give a huge number of meeps and mutes, writing compositions, 30-minute compositions every semester, with undergrad testing in 05, and the IAD twice per semester. You guys know all that we do. There have been ongoing discussions about the writing test rubric, and about particularly how to apply and interpret the language in the 4 subcategories. So the task fulfillment, task development category, the organization and cohesion category, the lexical range and accuracy category, the grammatical range and accuracy category. So some of these conversations have come up during the calibration sessions that we've had, and so this is just a little bit of the context of why this was an interesting possibility of doing an analysis. Chuck, did you have a question?
Real quickly, just to align language here, our subcategories are what are called domains, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the analysis in one of the papers was a little, their facets were slightly different than what ours were.
Well,
But the
those are
subcategories
domains.
would be
We're talking
different.
about domains, right, yeah, okay.
Yes. So our assumptions before now, the argument that we made to CEA for the reliability of this writing test assessment. Our calibrations help us to bring the ratings together. The third rater system minimizes variability in ratings to an extent. I mean, obviously, if there's a wide discrepancy between ratings, we bring in a third rater. And when we make the argument that there are relatively few third ratings every semester. I mean, there are a handful with each testing session. In the fall, there are more than a handful, but the fact that there are relatively few indicates some level of consistency or reliability that we're rating pretty closely together. But on the other hand, we haven't done a formal analysis or any kind of statistical analysis of the reliability of the measure itself, and it's really difficult to do so with writing assessment. So the discussion in the Wagle paper was there are a lot of different factors involved in assessing writing in this type of a format. There's the individual's ability to write. There's the severity of the raters, right? The human component of it. We're not all robots, so there will be some level of difference. The variable difficulty of the tasks, and then for us, in our particular context, we have these 4 subcategories, and so applying those subcategories to a particular composition, there may be some variability there as well, which kind of goes into that level of severity. So as for this model, as you'll note from the papers, this is just kind of a summary of 2 of the main assumptions of the RASH model, is connectivity. So the idea is that there's enough overlap between the different candidates. Like in this case, it was mutes that I used. So one person takes 2 different compositions. Each composition gets 2 separate scores, right? Two separate total scores with 4 separate sub-scores. So each person gets a total of, 16 total, a minimum of 16 total sub-scores from a minimum of 2 people, ideally 3 or 4 different people, different raters. And so when there's overlap, so if there's sufficient overlap between the candidates, raters, and tasks, so, and I'll explain what that means a little bit more in a minute. the model can put the candidates on, so what's called a unidimensional scale, so of candidate ability, of rater severity, so more severe raters, less severe raters, and then the difficulty of the tasks, more severe tasks and less severe tasks. So it does this using a probabilistic model. I'll get to it in a minute. So the candidates then are judged, or are in the model. There's a relative ability score that they get across the different raters and the different tasks that they did. The raters are given a score for their severity, and also the model is able to account for, or able to detect variation in the judgment. So how consistent you are in rating the different people, or in separating the different people relative to the other raters. The task characteristics, the relative difficulty of the tasks compared to the other tasks, and then the rubric subcategory comparisons, any distinctions between categories that there are, and I'll get to that further in a minute. So it's really tricky to get enough overlap in this type of a context because each comp is usually only scored by 2 people, and so there needs to be a lot of times where Ray and Marilena aren't the only 2 raters for this person's 2 comps. So for one person's 2 comps, it's best to have the same person rated by Ray and Marilena for one, and Brooke and Annalise for another. Which I found when I went back to fall 2013 and input all the data from there, and there was too little overlap. So what people had been doing were maybe like 2 of you were sitting over here. You each took a pile of comps, you rated them, and then you swapped the pile, which is maybe convenient and easy, but it meant that I couldn't actually apply that data those data to this type of analysis. So there wasn't enough variation in the raters to fit the model. One implication that I kind of tried to start addressing in the fall was that during the rating sessions we should vary as much as possible who's rating the different comps. So we'll get more of a kind of a representative sample. But from the fall, I don't know if you guys remember when we were sitting in this room, I was much more annoying and involved in taking comps from you once you had rated them and redistributing them. That was actually because Liz and I talked about how we wanted a little bit more variety so in each person's comp ratings, they were getting ratings from more than just 2 people for their 2 comps. But then also, it ended up working out well for this, to apply to this model as well. Yes?
So John, in this research that you did, did you only use 7 students?
I only ended up using the incoming student mutes from the fall 2014.
Because you couldn't use the others because you had only 1 comp each.
Right, exactly. Right, and I think if I would have put all the meat data in, it might. I'm not sure if the model would work if I would have put the meat data in from the fall or not. That would be interesting. Also, is if it would work with just 2 comps. But with each person having 2 comps with 4 ratings, there was enough distribution that the model could then fit the data and we could do actual comparisons.
So did you only use the incoming comps, or did you use the exit comps at the end of the semester?
Only the incoming comps, because the exit comps were from the classes, and there are so many different topics that it wouldn't fit the model. Like in the data that I actually used, it was from 2 different mute. So it was from the business school mute and then the grad school mute, which we only used 2 topics for each of those days. So there were only 4 total tasks.
I just had a question about other models, because it seems from these readings and from what you're saying, this model only fits for 2 topics?
No.
Okay, so you can use more than 2 topics?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
because
you
I'm a
can.
little concerned that with just 2 topics, it's not enough of a sample size.
Well, to look at
topic.
maybe to look at task difficulty, we would still be able to look at the other things. What I think.
Well, I just remember, maybe we'll talk about the engineering, they kept talking about how the engineering topic was so much harder, but I kept thinking, well, maybe that was just a bad topic, or maybe these were too far apart from each other, so. I'm
Yeah.
just interested in what our results were like, how many topics we analyzed, and.
The Engelhard paper analyzed like 7 or 8 different topics.
Yeah.
Right, I'm thinking more of the other one.
Yeah.
So the angle that I took was not, so I mean, there was sufficient data to fit the model to look at the difficulty of the tasks. But, and there were 4 tasks. But the problem I was trying to mention with Nina is that there were too few students on those particular tasks. So like, if students in an 07 class, there were only like 10 students, that wouldn't be enough for that task to then be put into the model and fit it. So that's why because there were lots and lots of students who took these 4 tasks.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just curious.
So, yeah. It's a little bit different.
Thanks.
And then, so the model is probabilistic in nature. So given the observed ratings, the raters, the candidates, and the tasks, so the model can predict what an expected score would be for a subsection given, or for a given candidate from a rater with average severity relative to all the rest of the raters. And they talked about this fair mean average a little bit in one of the papers. I didn't care so much about that for the students. I mean, that's kind of a separate admin issue, is how we would deal with that, or if it really means that much for our students. I was more interested in some of the aspects of rater severity and task difficulty, like those types of things. So for this study, I mean, it was a fairly informal study. My research questions were, do the data from the writing test fit the RASH model for the analysis? From the fall of 2014, it did, so we'll move forward with the analysis of those data. Secondly, is there evidence of reliability in our ratings? Third, which we would expect, so the reliability statistic that it gives is within yourself. So do you give consistently lenient or severe ratings, or somewhere in the middle? It's not inter-rater reliability in the kind of the classic sense that you'll read about. Is there systematic variability in the severity of the raters? In other words, would someone who was rated by 2 severe judges just be out of luck? Talk about that. And fourth, are there substantial differences in the difficulty of the tasks? Which one of the papers spends quite a bit of time talking about or looking at. Yes?
I have a question about research question 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not that you would want someone to get rated severely twice, but wouldn't you want there to be systematic severity?
Well, you assume some level of variability because we're people.
A systematic would show that people were being unreliable. Is that what that means?
Well, I think it's not necessarily maybe better than is there systematic variability is what is the variability
In the severity.
Yeah, in the severity. I think that's maybe a better formulation of the question.
Yeah, that is really useful actually.
But John, so when you say systematic variability, though, you mean like any given person is at a predictable level of
Is at a
severity?
predictable level of severity
Yeah.
consistently?
But isn't that what you mean by question number 2?
Yeah, I think they're related. I think maybe number 3 it would be better phrased as so what is this variability?
But I think they're importantly separately because you could be reliable, but you could be lenient.
Exactly.
Or you can be reliable and you can be severe as a reader.
Right.
And the question is like, are you reliable and then are you severe or lenient? So.
Right. So yeah,
Yeah, that makes
reliability and severity.
sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Wording.
How consistent,
With
how
yourself.
severe, like,
Yeah.
or how lenient.
Yeah.
Fifth, is it more likely for candidates to get a better score on certain subcategories? Just a person with average ability. Are the subcategory ratings consistent with the model predictions? So when the model predicts that a person would get a certain sub-score rating, were our ratings consistent? Generally, yes. To give you a little preview. Are the rating subcategories statistically separable or collapsible? So what this means, are we really rating 4 separate categories? Are we rating task fulfillment and task development, organization cohesion, lexical range and accuracy, grammatical range and accuracy? Are we separating those 4, or are they collapsible into small? I mean, essentially, are we calling grammar and lexis the same thing, and one of the other and the other 2 the same thing, something like that? And then if there are any unexpected ratings in the model predictions, if there are really different ratings, subscore ratings than what's expected, then the model will flag it and it will show that. And there are a few examples of those, but I'll talk about those in a minute. But, well, the question was what types of ratings. So the data, there were 165 total students who took the MUTE in the fall. There were 2,136 of these subcategory ratings, so 534 overall comps.
No wonder we're
Overall,
tired.
yeah. This
We
is,
were doing.
I'm tired just running. And there were 13 raters for this. So results. The first research question I already answered. We could do the analysis. The data did fit the model. The second research question, evidence of reliability. Overall, the within rate of reliability was very high at 0.84. That's pretty common. So that means if you were, wherever you were at on the severity or leniency scale, you were pretty consistent.
With yourself.
Yes, with yourself.
I'm still struggling to understand reliability and variability and severity. I mean, if you're not reliable with yourself, is that necessarily a problem of severity? If you're just
Well-
all over the map.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily, I mean, it would just be, like, the severity would be your average severity across all of the different ratings that you give.
Yeah.
So if you give 2 extreme ones, it would be somewhere, it would be,
Isn't reliability
reliability is used in different ways.
different? I mean, I'm also thinking, some of the comps are bad, and some of the comps are good. And so, what your scores are depends on who's writing your reading.
Right, so the comps for a person who is bad, in that case, a person who has low ability, you would be being consistent with yourself to give them low scores. But the reliability is your score in relation to everyone else on how severe you are
With that one person.
with that one person. Yeah, relative to what everyone else would give
That's
that
why
one
you need
person.
2 comps.
Yeah.
At least.
And as much information as possible. In an ideal world with this model, everyone would rate every comp. And then we would really be able to, but we don't. We just don't have the resources to do that. So it's a, yes.
Is this reliability figure the, across the domains, or is this averaging all the domains together, or?
I think it's across all 4 of the subcategory scores.
So
My
you
understanding
could
of it
answer
is-
the question to say, did raters have different reliability when rating task development than rating Lexis?
Right. I can't ask that. Yeah, that's a really good question. That would be an interesting thing to then just take the data from from a single category and look at that. Yeah, but that would have to be a different analysis. Yeah. So we were fairly consistent. The new raters were slightly less consistent. So if you came in the fall, this is really common. I mean, this is pretty typical, so don't feel bad. Third research question, so the rater severity question, which is obviously interesting for us. So I'm going to put some information up on the board. So the total count here is the total subscores written. So each time you rated a comp, you wrote 4 subscores. So so this person, in this case Daniela, rated 104 separate comps during these 2 testing sessions.
Oh, it's in the back.
Nina. Nina was giving the meat tests. I think maybe both times. Or objective scoring or something like that.
She's eating cookies.
Yeah.
I stand.
There is one implication because there were several of us that were in here for the whole time, and there were let's see, Daniela and this is Carolyn and this is Eric. So we're all you all rated many more compositions than the rest of us. So. That may be something to keep in mind. Obviously, we totally understand. Some people read at different rates.
This is the shaming part of your.
No, not at all. It's just something to keep in mind. Obviously, just to be careful when reading.
This presentation
So,
has a shaming part.
Okay, so here's our observed average. This is the average score that you gave for each. This is the average score that you would have given to the average. I guess average ability candidate or person.
How do you know that?
Statistical mumbo jumbo.
Yeah,
It's a program, Nina. You type in the score, you hit enter, and that's it. Okay.
yeah. Well, it's not exactly that simple. It's a complicated logarithm that I put in that I didn't put in. That was in one of the articles. That it's predicting what you would give based on your scores, based on the ability, based on a lot of these other facets or factors. So it is really complicated. I can point you to some more good literature if you like.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Your mention of, because of assignments and so forth, so, that Daniela was like a robot going through these and,
Oh, I didn't say that.
No, I mean, just the amount she's, produced, but I mean, and this would be difficult just to manage, but, if we could keep track of, this is my first, this is my second, this is my third, this is my 416th essay, and then look at the individuals and see if there was any change in the scoring, because I'm thinking of the fatigue factor, I'm thinking of the irritation factor, that could set in, and we are very diligent about trying not to succumb to that, but again, it's a question of being
Also,
human.
when I'm scoring, I find the first few comps before I get going, I feel very incompetent at and unsure. And then, starting with about the third or fourth one, I think I kind of get back into the groove and I can do it.
Well, I would argue that the within person reliability score, generally people were consistent, at least relative to each other, in terms of how they ranked the candidates
Through each
across the whole thing. It would be interesting for each individual person. It doesn't. This model doesn't compute each individual person's, and over time, it's an interesting question. Sounds like a great study for you to do.
But we don't know, so we don't capture that. We have to.
Right.
No, that's probably impractical.
Well, no, all you have to do is write the time that you do the analysis.
Yeah.
It also depends on whether it's first or second read.
Well, that we do capture.
Yeah, but it's
Like
not-
who's doing the first read and the second
Right.
read.
And why would that matter in terms of?
Because we all say we don't look, but some people look, and it does affect
Well,
it.
sometimes you add somewhere else. No, but it happens unintentionally. It happens
You can
unintentionally.
see our
It's actually got 460.
She was probably the first grader. She was going so quickly. Everyone was looking at her.
So on that topic, it was just a general suggestion to, as we're all professionals, obviously. So this is the measure of difficulty. So these people are technically the more severe raters, and these people are generally the more lenient raters. So several of you have already named, but drum roll, please. If you want to know where you're at on the scale. Anyone think that they would particularly be more lenient? Ray, you already know. Anyone think they're more severe relatively, just informally?
Clearly, I don't write night shift with what the others do.
Okay, so here it is. You can find your initials there.
So the ones with the negatives are severe or?
Are more lenient.
So the further down you're on the list, the more.
The more lenient you are,
I'm the king of the roads.
Yeah, as you'll notice.
I'm
down
right
here at
there in the
bottom,
middle.
We have Ray Smith. So just interesting. I mean, this is more for hopefully for our benefit than anything. But it's so on average, a student with average ability who is rated by I think this is an important point. Who is rated by Heather and Carolyn would have received subsection scores on average. These are doubled of around 2.25. So this person would get a 4.5 total. The same student would have received subsection scores of around 2.5 from Ray and Brooke and passed. Same person, same task.
Yeah.
So two different pairs of rating. So answer to research question 2, yes.
So.
There is in this case a rater effect on the scores.
So
Yes.
Is that,
Can you say that last?
is that information,
That's amazing.
you think,
She
valuable
sends
enough
out in the middle.
to go from there to the next testing and say that Heather and Carolyn will not rate the same comp, and Ray and Brooke will not rate the same comp, but you're gonna pair a more severe with a less severe.
That's it.
rater?
That's a great question. And I'm going to get to that in the discussion, but the answer is no. Obviously, I don't think we have enough data yet to make that claim. I'll make a few possible future directions or suggestions. And I'm not saying. I mean that for some of you, like for Julie, for Marlena, for Nina, and for Brooke, that's a relatively small number of comps that you rated, and even for Ray. That's only 25 comps for Ray to read. So that being said, all of this certainly needs to be taken with a grain of salt and put with more data. But I think it's an interesting preliminary analysis.
Maybe that's why it's in such a good mood, because they only rated 25.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I think that's a fascinating, Carolyn, I think your question is a fascinating research question with the number of comps that pass through our hands during that season. Fourth research question, are there substantial differences in the task difficulty? Actually, very little. Statistically, there were very little, the differences were very small. And in the 4 tasks that were, and I forgot to include them. If you want me to send you the 4 different topics that were used, or in the fall mutes, then I can do that. But
How did you determine that?
I didn't determine it. So from
What
all
was it determined?
from all of the scores for all of the students in all all 4 of the tasks. So based on the ability of the test takers and the severity of the raters and all of these other facets, the information about the differences between the tasks, there was not, it was